All right, we're going to get started. We're going to walk through, get an avatar exported from Mixamo, get some animations exported from Mixamo, and bring those into Unreal. Put those on a timeline, create a little camera in Unreal, animate that camera, render things out from Unreal. And that should be it for today. But all this stuff is what you're going to have to do for your assignment. All right, so I'm going to go to Mixamo. And pick a character. If you want to follow along in person, you can. If you want to just watch, you can. I'm going to Mixamo and I'm going to get this zombie character here. So I'm prepping this to bring this into Unreal. So first thing that I'm going to do, and this will make more sense when I actually have everything imported into Unreal, but I'm going to import this in two different parts. The first thing that I'm going to import is just the character, just the skeletal mesh in a T-pose without any sort of animation on it. I'm going to import that into Unreal as its own file. And then I'm going to import each animation that we put on top of this zombie character as its own animation file. So if I import two animations and this character into Unreal, those are going to be three separate files that I'm importing. That'll become more clear in a second here. So I'm happy with this character. Doesn't really matter to me what character that you want to use. Again, if you want to stick with your existing virtual world, that's fine. If you want to make something new, that's fine. I think creating something new is good practice. Doing this over and over again is how you're going to get better at it. But I'm just going to stick with my little zombie dude here. And in the top right, I'm going to click download. Download, FBX, T-pose. Big orange download button. Oops. So this file that I'm downloading now is the actual mesh of the character, the textures of the character, and you can see it's actually quite large for what it is. This is, this file here, it's a terrible name, chapter 10 non-PBR FBX. It's over 100 megabytes. I'm going to actually rename this something, stay organized and Unreal, remember? I'm going to call it SK for skeletal. Oops. SK skeletal zombie. So this tells me that this is the skeletal mesh of the zombie. Okay. Now let's go get some animations for this. And I know Mixamo has zombie animations. And maybe I'll get a couple of these so that we can link them together. We'll kind of think about this a little bit. Maybe we want to get the zombie walk. Or we get the zombie idle. And think about this yourself, because I would like you to link animations together too for your assignment. But also this is good to think about in the future too with motion capture in the studio. Although you'll be recording long takes rather than these kind of standalone animations. But we will look at blending the animations together today. So I'm gonna get this idle animation. I'm gonna get the walk. And I don't know, there's not really a good transition for him. Maybe the scream. Yeah, I'm gonna get all three of those. So I kind of need to get them individually here. So I'm gonna get the idle, download. Now this is a little bit different. We want to say FBX without skin. Without skin means that it's just going to, all the file is going to have in it is the animation data for whatever's happening with this character right now. I'm already importing the mesh and the textures into Unreal. I don't need to import those things again. If I imported it with the skin, it would be fine in Unreal. It's just that they're going to come in as completely standalone characters, and I'm not going to be able to have their animations be shared within the character, which can be a problem. So I'm going to say without skin, download. And I'm going to do this 3 times. Download for the walk without skin, FBX. One more. You know, we'll do 4. Let's get the run too. Another thing to think about is that Mixamo has this toggle down here that says in place. If I just get this animation of this zombie walking like this, that's fine. But at a certain point, the animation ends and it chops back to the beginning. I could just get the in place version, which means that I'm going to have to manually move this zombie in the timeline. This is actually more useful though, I think. So I'm going to download this one without skin. I'm going to get rid of that one because it's not in place. The idle one is kind of in place already, so it doesn't matter. Let's get the run too. I'm also going to do that in place. Download without skin. And zombie attack. Cool. All right, I'm going to go to those files in Explorer, and I'm going to clean them up a little bit. Call this A for animation, A underscore zombie. I think this was the idle. A underscore zombie walk. Just copy that. Zombie run. Zombie attack. All right. I have four animations. Four animations and 1 skeletal mesh. All of those animations, I'm going to tell Unreal, are going to use the skeleton that is sk underscore zombie. All right, now I'm done with Mixamo. I'm going to jump over to Unreal. I'm going to add a new folder here just to stay organized. Zombie. And we can import things in Unreal with the import button in the content browser. I'm going to do the first one by itself, sk zombie. Also, take a look at how big in file size the sk, the skeletal mesh zombie with the mesh and the textures, that's over 100 megabytes. The animations are under 1 MB because it's just numbers. It's just animation values saying, what is the degrees in rotation of this elbow joint. It's not actual graphic files in terms of JPEGs for the textures. It's not a mesh. It's just numbers. So animation files are much smaller. I'm going to do the skeletal mesh first, SK zombie. It's going to pop up this big box. Usually you can just keep all this stuff at defaults. Some things to think about. If you're having trouble, sometimes toggling this use TO as reference pose can help. It'd probably be fine for Mixamo, but just want to put that out there because it'll probably be useful in the future. Also, when we start to use Motion Builder next week, these toggle boxes use 30 Hertz to bake bone animation, snap to closest frame boundary. Those can be useful if you're having troubles importing from Motion Builder. Otherwise, yes, we want to import textures. If your mesh is coming in white, it's probably because you don't have import textures toggled. I'm going to click import. See what happens. This could take fast or it could take a little while depending on how big it is. Oh, you know what? I messed up. Notice that the mesh is gray. Didn't I just get done saying that? I clicked the import textures button, but I did not click the create materials button. We can manually create our own material, but I'm just going to do this over again real quick. Sometimes some settings are buried in here. It's hard to see. There we go. Import textures, yes, but import materials, yes as well. Import. There we go. So you may get some warnings in Unreal. If they are yellow, they are warnings and can usually be ignored. It says imported skeletal mesh, SK zombie, has some invalid bind pose. It also has no smoothing group information. Usually just ignore this stuff. Unless it causes a noticeable problem, just ignore it. Another thing to note, all of these files which I just imported, they all have asterisks on them. I need to save all. Easiest way to save all is click the Save All button. Click Save All. Save all. The asterisks all disappear. They're all saved now. Let's take a little tour of these files here. So these files that I have selected, these are all the textures for the character. Diffuse textures, shininess, normal map, specular. This is all that's available and needed for the zombie character. The green ones here, there's actually two different types of green ones. The dark green ones here, the materials. This is the material. This is the paint that goes on top of the 3D character. The paint is made from the textures. The material gets put onto the mesh. The pink one, SK Zombie, that is the skeletal mesh. That's the one that has the rig and the mesh. And there's also two more. The light green one here, this is actually an animation file just for the character in a T-pose. And then the last thing down here is the skeleton for that character. The skeleton here is going to be important because when we import the animations, we're going to need to tell Unreal to use this skeleton. the animation is referencing the skeleton. I'm going to double click on the skeletal mesh, the pink one, and it's going to open up the skeletal mesh editor. There's a lot of different stuff here, but don't get too intimidated. Not much that we need to know. So here's the skeletal mesh. Down in the bottom right, we have the materials associated with it. In the top right, we have a skeleton hierarchy of all of the joints here. I can actually grab onto these joints and mess around with them too if I wanted to. It's not going to animate like that, but we can. Toggles at the top that are useful to know. The one that I have clicked on right now is actually pink. This is a skeletal mesh editor. The one on the left is just going to show you the skeleton hierarchy. It's a little cute skeleton icon. And then the one on the right, this running green character, that is the animation window. Let's look at the skeleton window. So here's another view of all the skeleton joints. You can actually look at all of them here if I, where's this at? Bones, all hierarchy. The hierarchy of bones. If I click on the animation window, the green running guy, it's just playing the T-pose. You can see the timeline's freaking out down here. It's just playing a T-pose. And down here in the asset browser, this is where my list of animations that this character has access to will live. Right now, it's just the T-pose. We can close this down. All right, let's import some animations. Import button again. And I'm going to import these all at once in the interest of time. I have 4 of them. Click open. Now some important stuff here to note. We want import only animations checked up top. And we want, see the option below that, skeleton? This is the skeleton that I want it to be. In my case, your skeleton's going to be called something different. Perhaps you're working on a zombie film and you have different types of zombies, right? So you might have different zombie skeletons. Becomes crucial here to select the right skeleton for what you're using. Unreal does a pretty good job at making an educated guess. And in this case, that's not difficult because it's literally the only skeleton in my project. But when you start to actually have a more robust, larger project, there's going to be a list of stuff here. Make sure you're picking the right one. Like I said, Unreal usually picks the right one, but if it doesn't, then you know why. And also sometimes you might want to just click clear and have this not use any skeleton. Especially if you're importing like a second zombie, SK Zombie 2 or something like that. And you're saying, no, you're not using the same zombie skeleton, you're using a different skeleton. I don't want to use this one, so I'm going to clear it and use none. And it's going to create a new one. For our purposes, we just have one right now. Okay, you're going to use this skeleton, import only animations. Anything else? Anything else? There's those options that I talked about earlier. We don't need to worry about that right now. We're not in Motion Builder. There are no materials. They're just animations. There are no textures. They're just animations. Click Import. 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you see in the thumbnails that your animations are in the positions that they should be for the animation, then you should feel pretty good that it's going to work. This may seem super easy, and with Mixamo it is. This can become really annoying if things go wrong. So it's not always going to be this easy. All right, I'm going to go back to my skeletal mesh zombie again. I'm going to go back to the animations window. And I should have all those animations listed down here. Ooh. Down here in the bottom right in my asset browser. Notice they also have asterisks next to them. Make sure you save. I'm actually going to do that right now. Control Shift S to save all. And now I just can click them in the bottom right. Remember, this is walking in place. All the animations are here. Awesome. Now we can start using them. So I'm going to close this window down. Close this window down. Go back to my main viewport here. It's a little bit of a bummer that they wiped the computers because I had that creepy graveyard scene in here, but it took a while to download. I can sign in real quick. You know what? That's fine. In the interest of time. Yours will be much more interesting than my beautiful clouds and flat checkerboard ground. Okay, let's start animating. So if I just grabbed these animations and dragged them into my world, you can see that they're not going to be animated. If I was to click on one and then go over to the details panel, I could adjust the initial position and I could drag it and it would move. If I clicked the play button, they would animate, because in the details panel it says that they should play and loop. But that's not really how we do things in this class. We use the timeline in here because we're making films. So let's put these on a timeline. So I'm going to delete all these again. And I'm going to drag the skeletal mesh in, the T-pose one. I'm going to zero him out. Don't really need this player start and get rid of that. And I'm going to create what's called a level sequence. Level sequences can be created up here in the top toolbar, the slate icon, add level sequence. You can have any number of level sequences in a level map, whatever you want to call it. You can also nest level sequences within each other if you wanted to for some reason. But for our purposes today and for your purposes going forward, usually you're going to have just one. Maybe not though. I'm going to click add level sequence. It's going to ask me what you want to call it. I'm going to call it ls underscore, I don't know, zombie. Sure. And here we have an empty timeline. I can grab onto the timeline indicator here and go to a specific time. I can grab onto the green and the red in and out points and adjust them. I can look at how many frames I have. You can see this timeline starts at frame 0. And then currently, with the red line, it ends at frame 150 or 149, it looks like. Say my animation was longer, I can make it longer by adjusting these numbers down bottom. Very similar to any other sort of timeline in other software. If I change this number to 300, and I drag this out to, say, 240-ish, now I have my timeline being 240 frames long. The frames per second being right here. You can change this if you want to. Down in the bottom left, we have play buttons, step 1 frame forward, 1 frame back, jump to the end, jump to the beginning, set the in and out point with the red and the green, step with the one with the diamond icon, step 1 keyframe forward and back. Very similar controls to, again, any sort of timeline you've ever used before. You can also hit the space bar to play for 240 frames. This is not currently set to loop, so it's just going to stop at the end. The loop is down here. If you want it to continuously loop or not, it's up to you. Over here on the left is a whole lot of nothing. This is where our actor tracks are going to go. Remember, an actor is anything that you can add to a level in Unreal Engine, like the skeletal mesh of the zombie. I'm going to add that here. There are a couple different ways to add things to the timeline in Unreal. You can just select it in the outliner and drag it in. You could go to the Add button and go to Add Actor Track and say Add SK Zombie that way. There's also a list here that is your outliner. A lot of different ways to add things. I usually just drag them in. So I dragged it in. You can see I got a couple different things. I got transformation options to set keyframes on. Remember, transformation is the actual position of the mesh, not the animation, just the position. And then there's the animation line there, the animation track. That's going to allow me to add the actual animations that I got from Mixamo. For example, let's just jump this back to the start. I'm going to click transformation. In location, I'm going to click the diamond plus icon to start recording a keyframe. At 0 frames, I'm going to say the location of this mesh. What I mean by location is the actual position of that little widget there. That's its position, which just happens to be 000 location. And I added a keyframe there by clicking the little diamond icon. You can click the diamond icon there. You can also click the little diamond icon over on the attribute here on the right that you want to add. Lots of different places to do the same thing. Then I'm going to say, I don't know, at frame 60, I want you to be here. I have to click the Add Keyframe button again. Boop. Now it moves when I scrub the timeline. See, I had to manually add that keyframe. An interesting feature to use is the auto keyframe button. So this little key on the diamond icon here, this is going to automatically lay down keyframes. So if I go to frame 120 and then I drag this and say that he's back here, it automatically adds a keyframe. I don't have to go and click the little diamond keyframe button. And this right here, folks, is the most amazing animation you'll ever see. It's called Zombie Sliding Around Checkerboard Floor. Amazing, right? This is just transformation, though. This is not actual animations. I want to delete those keyframes and go back to nothing. But let's start adding the actual animation, though, the more interesting stuff. In the animation track here, if I click on the little plus icon, it's going to show me what animations are available to this character. Yeah, all the ones that we imported, right? So I'm going to start out with the idle one. And as soon as I put it on, the character jumps into position. I can grab onto this track and choose where I want it to start. I can grab onto the ends to trim it. If I grab onto the end here and drag it longer, you can actually see that a little dotted line in the middle here, that's the loop point. And we're lucky in this case that Mixamo designs the animations so that they seamlessly loop. For your animations that you make and record with motion capture in the ballrooms, unless you process them in post-production, clean them up, they're most likely not going to loop out of the box. There's going to be a little jerk, a little chop. So I hit play now. Here I have a very subtle idle animation playing. Exciting. If I right-clicked on this animation, there's other sorts of properties that I can change. I can change the playback speed of it. Oops. I could change the playback speed, say that it's 4 times as fast. What I'm going to try to do here is I'm going to try to link all my animations together the best way possible. I didn't really plan this out, so it's probably not going to be great, but we can give it a shot. So I'm going to drag my timeline here. I'm going to click on the animation track again, go to the plus. What do we want this to do? He starts idle, and then maybe he walks. Starts idle, maybe he screams, and then walks. I don't know, I'm just freestyling here. Let's do the scream. No, let's do the walk. I'm overthinking this. The walk. Okay. So now I have 2 different animations. The idle, then it's going to pause, and then the walk starts. The reason that it paused is because these 2 animations have a gap in between them. I can butt them up together. I can also overlap them. If I overlap them, I get this little hourglass, sideways hourglass looking thing. That is the blending. That means blending is happening between the animations. And I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to get here. So I'm just going to play it and see what happens. So see, it's blending from the idle, and then it starts blending right here into the arm stretched out walk. Now, does that look good? I don't know. Let's take a look. Again, I didn't plan this out, so it's a little trial and error here. Well, it's not great. There's a little bit of sliding happening, but maybe it's okay for our... that's a little bit too fast. To be honest, I kind of think that he should step forward. He does step forward with that foot, but maybe I should trim that down and then try this. Well, you have to work to get it to look good. It's not really the point of right now. But the point is that you can see that the 2 animations are blending together. In order to get this to work well, you need to blend through animations that are going to work together. You wouldn't want to blend, say, I don't know, you had like a superhero character, right? And you want to blend from sitting animation to flying Superman animation. That's going to be really strange. It's going to come out of the chair and like stick his butt out and his legs up and start flying, right? You need some sort of intermediary. Like they need to get out of the chair, idle, take off, fly, right? There needs to be stages of the animations. Idle to the walk here, guess, is not so bad. And I know we don't really talk about making video games in this class, but this is kind of what's happening in your video game. You know, when you don't touch any of the joysticks, the zombie starts idling, and then you start pushing the analog stick and it starts walking. Similar sort of thing. It's not on a timeline. It's in what's called an animation blueprint in Unreal, but similar sort of idea. Let's add some more animations. Same thing. Animation button. Maybe he starts running at some point. Again, trial and error, trial and error. It's a little bit too fast. A little bit too fast. That's not terrible. It's not great, but it's not terrible. And then maybe add another animation, have him come to an idle again. Maybe a little bit too fast. And then trim this down. Then maybe do the last one where it does the attack. If you ever see the animations pop up on a different line like this, you can just drag them up. There we go. Good enough for our purposes today. Let's play this out. Walking, running, attack, bar, and end. So we downloaded a character from Mixamo. We imported it into Unreal. We downloaded a bunch of different animations from Mixamo, brought them in, imported them into Unreal, assigned the animations to the existing skeletal mesh skeleton, created a level sequence, and brought them into the level sequence. Questions about any of that? These animations are different than what you're going to get in the motion capture room. These animations are more meant to loop. They're not really long form animations like you'll be recording on your own, but you will also be bringing your animations into Sequencer when we get to that point. Similar sort of thing. Questions before we move on? You know, one thing I didn't do is I didn't actually have the zombie transform, right? So I can go to the transformation options. Have him start to walk. This is going to be a trial and error to see. That looks really bad. That's not so bad. That's kind of funny. All right, good enough for right now. But because those animations don't actually transform, I have to transform it. Other thing that could be useful to know with keyframes here. If you right click on the keyframe, you can change what's called its interpolation. If you're familiar with animating in After Effects, you may have heard this called easing, easy ease out, similar sort of thing. So right now I'm just using cubic auto, which means that it is easy eased in, it is smoothed in, and it is smoothed out. Let me see if I can show you an example with a shape. Cube. Let's drag this cube in to Sequencer. Let's set the transformation on the cube. Let's get away from that zombie. Transformation. And let's just set this. Let's go back this way. So when I click play, you should see that the cube doesn't start moving at its full speed right away. It takes a little bit of acceleration time to warm up. All right, now it's moving. This is a little bit too long. Now you should start to see it decelerate right here. And then it finally comes to a stop. It's a little bit hard to visualize, but Unreal Engine and all animation softwares that deal with keyframes, Unreal has what's called a curve editor or a graph editor. This little grid icon right here. This is easier to see. Oops. This is easier. Well, stop snapping. Stop. Here it's easier to see the actual acceleration of this transformation of the cube. See this green line here? This is transformation on the y-axis in Unreal. And you can see that the animation starts, kind of goes. And then here it's pretty much the same speed all the way, until it starts to decelerate right here. Slower, 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 stop. Easing in and easing out. If I was to select these keyframes, both of them, and I right click on them, and I change this to linear, there's not going to be any smoothing anymore. There's no acceleration. It just starts at the speed it is. Again, a little bit hard to visualize in this example here. Maybe if I make it faster. Oops. It's just the same speed the whole time. And if I look at the graph editor, it doesn't have those curves anymore. It's just a straight line. It's a linear line. So there's different types of keyframes, different types of keyframe interpolation. And what that is just the smoothing on the keyframes. There's also hold keyframes, which is called a constant in Unreal, and other different types. Questions about any of that? All right, let's look at another property here. I'm going to add a spotlight. Let's make this very bright. Let's turn down the sunlight. This. All right, I have a spotlight. I can drag spotlights into sequencer or any sort of lights, just like anything else, any other actor. Spotlight. Now I could keyframe its value. Maybe I just want it to pulse, like 8,000, 1,000. That's not enough. That's 100. You can copy and paste keyframes too. Control C, Control V. Spooky. Maybe I'll add another light. Maybe a rectangle light. Make it really wide, tall. Very proud of this one. Don't forget to save. There's also a save icon and sequencer right here. Little floppy disk icon. We have animation, animated light. A couple different things going on. A random cube moving across the screen for some reason. Well, right now, we just have the perspective camera. What we could do is we could add a cine camera. There's a couple different places that you can do that at. you could go to the quick add button with the green plus up top, cinematic, syn camera actor. Probably easier though, if you have sequencer already open, to just click on the little camera icon right there. Now let's check this out. Right now, this is my perspective camera. I'm actually going to make this unlit so you can see everything. So this is the camera that I just created, right? And when I click on it, I get a little camera view right here of what it's seeing. If I move the camera, it moves in the little window. This window disappears if you click off your camera. Little pro tip, there's a push pin icon right here that you can click to get that to stay on your screen, even if you unclick from the camera. So if you find yourself going back and forth, you can find that useful. Also, in the viewport options here for cameras, this is telling you what camera is currently in your viewport. Right now I'm looking at the perspective camera. The perspective camera is just the editor camera. It's just looking at the world, right? If I click this drop down and I look, there's the camera that I just created called Syn Camera Actor. It's not a bad idea to rename in the outliner your cameras, especially if you have a bunch of them. But right now, Syn Camera Actor is fine. If I click on Syn Camera Actor, it's going to make my viewport through that camera. If you don't believe me, let me drive this camera up close to the zombie. And then click the drop down and go to Syn Camera Actor. Now we're closer to it. I did stretch out my aspect ratio, so it doesn't look exactly like that, but it's close. So I'm looking through the Syn Camera Actor right now. Be careful, because when you are acting as that camera, when you select that camera, you become the camera. So for instance, if I was to go down here and say, work on the floor, and then I went back and switched my perspective camera, I moved that camera to look at the floor. It's very easy to accidentally move your camera somewhere that you didn't intend to have it to move, which is really annoying if you're working on something and you go and do something else and you realize, oh shit, I'm still in the Syn Camera Actor and I just drove this thing all over my level. And I now have to go back and redo something. Just be careful. Remember, you can become the camera with the drop-down menu right here. You just select which camera you want. Also, if I become the camera again, acting as the camera can be useful because honestly, it's much easier to frame things up like this than it would be to grab onto the thing and then position it this way. You really, whatever makes the most sense for you, you really use both in tandem, but there is value to becoming the camera itself. And also there's a little eject button right here. When you hit that button, you will go back to your perspective camera. Boop. Another way to do this is by clicking on the camera icons in sequencer. So here's my Syn Camera Actor. If I click on that camera icon right here, it's going to turn blue. It's going to make my viewport that camera. Let me go back to lit mode and, I don't know, maybe lighten things up a little bit. It's a little dark right now. Actually, you know what? Let me add a directional light. I deleted that. I deleted everything to make it dark, and now I want to make it bright again, just so we can see stuff. If I click on this camera icon, and I could have multiple cameras in sequencer, and I might want to select between different ones. When I click on that camera icon, I become the camera. It switches to this camera, and it makes my viewport the aspect ratio of the camera. If I uncheck it, now I'm back in my viewport camera. If I click it again, now I'm back in my camera. Unclick, out of the camera. And like I said, if you had multiple cameras, you'd click between them. So right now, this character, let's just create a little animation here. This is, I don't know what we want to have happen. Let's have the camera start out here. I'm going to click on the transform for the camera and set a keyframe. And then I don't know, maybe really fast, the camera just comes right up to him. So then where's the animation kick in? Right here. Maybe it just pulls back slowly a tiny bit. Then he's going to start to run. So we could tilt the camera this way. Maybe we'll also pull back while this is happening. Kind of silly. That's okay. So here I've animated this camera, the transformation options. This would be a useful spot to maybe change the interpolation by clicking on the keyframes. Like if you didn't like the acceleration on the spin, you can modify those. This part, it completely loses him, so I'm going to modify it that way. This is very much a trial and error sort of a thing. I don't like that either. Delete that keyframe. I think good enough for now, though. So you may have noticed that it's very out of focus, right? We can set the focus in our camera. If we click on the camera itself, actually first, before we do that, I want to eject from the camera and then play this, and you'll see the camera animation. Oop. Not play it, I guess. I just want to slide it. You can see the camera animation happening. And this green line here, this is the motion path that the camera is traveling on. Just like animating camera in After Effects, or any sort of path in After Effects. But let's work on that focus. So if I click on the camera, over in the details panel, there's all sorts of things here. What sort of aspect ratio is it? What is it focused on? Is it a manual focus? Do you want to draw the focus plane? The focus plane is really nice because it's like a visual purple. Well, by default, it's purple. It's a visual indicator of what you're actually focusing on. What is the focal length? What is the aperture? All these sorts of things. And all of this stuff can be keyframed. I'm going to click on Draw Debug Focus Plane real quick. Draw Debug Focus Plane. And if I start playing around with this big number right here, see that big purple box? That is the focus plane. That is the actual two-dimensional plane of focus for the camera. You can also use the eyedropper tool to go and click on something, and the focus plane will move to that. Lots of different ways to do the same thing. I usually like to do it manually, but that's just me. But our camera moves. So you could also do focus tracking, focus method tracking instead of manual. and then you assign an actor, and it will always keep that actor in focus. Actually, it will be focused on the middle pivot of that actor. But in our case, I'm just going to do a manual. So I click the keyframe button here on manual focus. Can also click it over in sequencer, whichever place I want to do it. That bottom line there, it says manual focus. Keyframe. Drive my camera along. You can see that the focus plane moves back because the camera moved. Drag it forward again, right there. Maybe focus again, right here. Maybe you don't want a part in focus. You could have things be out of focus. Actually, kind of happy with that. Actually, don't mind that being out of focus. Until maybe right here. And when you're done seeing the purple visual indicator, you can just turn it off with unchecking draw debug focus plane. Oop. Now you can see the background's very out of focus. Love it.
They say I have like footage from my camera. No, like that movement, like message that camera.
Are you're filming real outside footage of something?
Yeah, I like that's the movement.
So two things. Absolutely. What you would have to do is you would have to track the movement of that camera, and you would track the movement of that camera in a camera tracking software. The simplest of being would be After Effects has 3D camera tracker, which is not great, but free and good enough for most purposes. I have an entire class where we do that. We would say film camera movement in this room, and then put digital assets, stick it to this carpet. That's what we would do. If you're talking about just extracting, if you're not, in that case, we bring the video footage of this room into Unreal, and then we would put the zombie on the carpet that we filmed in this room, right? We're merging the digital zombie with the film of this room. In your case, maybe, and more appropriate for this class, you want to just take real world camera movement. You don't care about the picture. You just want the movement, right? To bring that into the world. Easier way to do that would be to use the virtual camera in the studio rather than go through the extra step of recording video footage and then having to do the camera solving in After Effects. There's extra steps. You could do it that way, but it's more work, especially when we have the resources we have. Another way to do it would be like they have the virtual camera for iPads. Hold on. Apparently it works with the newer iPhones too. So you connect your phone or your iPad with Unreal, and then your phone becomes the viewport, and then you can sit at your desk and do those movements. And the camera will move around in Unreal and you can record it. So that's probably like the cleanest way to do it, what you're talking about. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
And this is free, VCam. The Unreal VCam app here is like the free solution if you don't have a motion capture studio. All right, so here's our amazing video. Super proud of it. You may notice that there's a little chattering pixels on top of the zombie's head, the out of focus portion. You don't really see it when it's not playing, but when it is playing, that is due to anti-aliasing, which we'll talk about in the future, how to clean that up, more advanced rendering settings. But I think for our purposes right now, this is fine. Other questions? We brought in animation from Mixamo into Unreal. We brought in a skeletal mesh from Mixamo. We brought in a bunch of animations. We created a level sequence in Unreal. We added the skeletal mesh and its animations to create a little scene. We added a Syn camera actor to Sequencer and animated the camera. We also animated the focus position to give it a little depth of field effect. And I really want like a big fire effect to happen right here. We've done a bunch of stuff so far. So how do I render this beauty out and post it to YouTube to impress everybody? That's the next step. Before we get there though, you may have noticed this camera cuts track up top. I'm glad somebody asked about it. Camera cuts track. I like to describe the camera cuts track. See if I can find. No, I don't have my graphic actually. Is it here? Probably not. I like to describe the camera cuts track. No, it doesn't look like it. Pretty sure I've used this analogy before in class. So you can have any number of cameras as you want in your world. Maybe we have a close-up camera and then a far-away camera and a tracking camera, camera looking over here at something else. You can have as many cameras as you want. Or you can have one camera and just change its position to everything. In the real world, you usually have to deal with the speed limit of people physically moving a camera around physical places, right? We can't warp cameras instantaneously around a basketball arena during a game, right? We need to have cameraman 1, 2, 3 all pointing their cameras, and then a director sits in the truck and it's like, all right, camera 1, that's the one that's going after the TV feed. Camera 2, camera 3, cut to those ones. The camera cut track does exactly that. It tells Unreal which camera to play up to the main viewport. Let me see if I can set up an example of this real quick. So I created a second camera, and the second camera is just going to be like a wide shot. All right. And the second camera is going to be a wide shot. So this camera and then this camera. If I unclick both of them, there's both cameras floating out there, right? If I click on my camera cut track, right now it's just the one camera. You can actually see the other camera sitting out there doing nothing. If I click on the camera cut track and I click on the plus icon right there, new binding, it shows me all the cameras that I have available. If I click on my second camera, now I have a separate track, sort of like what the animations and the blending that we did. So I can say that I want you to play here, and then we're going to cut back to, oops, get a little bit tricky. So essentially I have camera A, camera B, cut back to camera A. So camera A, cut to wide shot, camera B, cut to close-up camera, camera A. It's cutting between the cameras. If you don't want to use multiple cameras, that's fine, but the camera cuts track is still essential for you to know because the camera cuts track is what you're actually rendering out. you want to know what you're going to get when you render, click on the camera icon in your camera cuts track. That's what's going to come out of your render in Unreal Engine. If you ever render something from Unreal, and I guarantee this will happen for next week, if you ever render something out of Unreal and I don't know, you just found like the camera view that rendered is below the floor or something, or in some unexpected spot, guaranteed 99 times out of 100, the problem was is that you didn't have a camera cuts track. The camera cuts track gets created automatically when you add a camera from Sequencer. If you add a camera from the quick add and then you drag it into Sequencer, it's not going to make the camera cuts track automatically. That's okay. You can make your own camera cuts track automatically in the add button, and then in, well, it's grayed out right now because I already have one, but camera cut track. And then you would just click plus to add whatever cameras you wanted in there. So clicking on this camera shows me camera A. Clicking on this camera shows me camera B. Clicking on the camera cuts track, because I merged them together, shows me what I'm going to render. So whether you have multiple cameras or not, you need a camera cut track, or you're going to get unexpected renders of stuff that you didn't want. And you will know right away. When you click render, you get a little preview in Unreal of what's rendering. You will know right away if you messed up or not. Any questions about that? All right. Remember the G key on your keyboard. G for game allows you to go into game view. All of these icons you're not going to see in the render because it's going to go into game view, but if you don't want to see them in the editor, you can always hit the G key on and off. I think that's fine for right now. Let's render. So I'm going to save, Control-Shift-S. You can also click the floppy disk icon. We render in Unreal using the little slate icon right here. Before we do that, though, I suggest turning on a couple plugins. And depending on which preset project you started with, these might be on already. If you go to Edit, Plugins, one, we want a movie render queue. Turned on, which should be turned on. Oops. Movie render queue is the modern way of rendering from Unreal. I'm not sure why movie scene capture is still in here, because it's over 5 years old at this point. If you don't have movie render queue, it's because the movie render queue plugin is not turned on. It should be turned on for like all the project defaults that you select, but if you ever don't see movie render queue here and just movie scene capture, you can always turn it back on in Edit, Plugins, Movie Render Queue. Some other ones that I like to turn on. I like to turn on the ProRes codec. And I like to turn on the DNX HR codec. Usually I just use ProRes now because ProRes supported on PC widely, but I turn that on anyways. Word of caution, you have to restart Unreal for these to become active. I'm not going to do that right now in the interest of time. Oh, other thing to note about the ProRes codec, and this is really funny actually, and I was freaking out in a class one time because I couldn't figure out what was going on. Who makes ProRes codec? Apple, right? Well, Apple makes them if you didn't know that. Apple makes ProRes codec. You cannot render out of ProRes from Unreal if you're using Unreal on a Mac. Just pretty fun. Why can't I use ProRes on a Mac using Unreal? But you can render ProRes on a PC using Unreal. I don't know why. Maybe they fixed that in the most recent update, but I don't have access to a Mac, so it's not something I've checked recently. So I usually do render out ProRes or usually EXR files, which are image sequence files, but also ProRes for tests. What's that?
The second plugin that we should have installed apart from Movie.
The second one was, well, the first one, the most crucial, movie render queue. And that's just to get like the renderer, right? These ones are optional unless you want to render out in these codecs, ProRes codec and DNX HR, which is an Avid codec. If you're never going to render out in DNX HR, then you don't need to turn it on. Unreal will just take half a second longer to load up because you turned it on. All right, so I usually like to suggest to turn those things on. But let's render. So we're going to click on the slate. I'm happy with my animation. It looks good in the camera cuts track. Remember, we can look at the camera cuts track by activating the camera on that track. Click on Movie Render Queue. In this window, it's funny, the first time the Movie Render Queue came out, I didn't know that I could click on these buttons, and I was freaking out because I didn't know how to use this. Then I asked a friend how to do it, and they were like, "You idiot, you just click on the link here." You click on this, and another window pops up, and this is the Movie Render Queue. Right now, we are currently going to render out a JPEG image sequence of our file in 1920 by 1080, and it's going to get rendered to the saved folder in movie renders in our project folder. I don't really want to render out a JPEG sequence, so I'm going to turn this off. If I click on settings up top, there's a whole bunch of stuff that I can do. Recently, Unreal Engine finally got the option to render out MP4 files, which is fantastic for rendering out tests, quick tests. I would never suggest rendering out MP4s for final work. MP4 is a delivery format that's meant to just be uploaded immediately to YouTube. It is not an editing codec, and it has a bunch of limitations if you're actually working with it in editing. But for test and our purposes today, rendering out MP4 is fine. For your assignment, rendering out MP4 is fine. In a future class, we'll look at more advanced rendering settings, but this is fine for today. So I'm going to select MP4. Include audio. We don't have any audio. That's all fine. That's all fine. Click deferred rendering. You need deferred rendering on. This is all fine for right now. We're not getting into those things. Output. 1080, 1920 by 1080 is fine for me today. I can always increase that if I wanted to. You should have no problem rendering out like a 6K video on these computers. Anything above that, you come and talk to me if you want to render out an 8K video for some reason. And I'll tell you how you can do that. It takes a couple extra steps. There's also a bunch of other settings that most of which we will never look at, but the anti-aliasing ones we'll look at in the future. That will help clean up that chattering in the motion blur and in the depth of field on the top of the zombie's head that we saw. And some other things. Motion blur it will clean up, but not today. If you're happy with all that, click accept and click render. Render local. We don't have a render farm, so we're just rendering on our single machine. Which is kind of funny. Last week we talked about how Unreal is a real-time gaming engine and you don't have to render. Well, we're rendering right now. We're rendering out our film. But the render times are much faster than with traditional animation. Click render. It's going to have to compile the shaders. Usually it only has to do this one time unless you make major changes. So renders after this will be much faster. It's not doing any rendering right now. It's just compiling shaders to begin to render. Should show us a little preview. 361 frames. All right, there we go. Wow, I'm really proud of this one, guys. This one's going on the fridge. Export done. Little refresher where these files are located. I have to remember myself on this computer. C users, I guess this was I just created this project in the default location. If you're saving this to your SSD, it's going to be on your SSD. Documents, no, shit. C users, MC post lab, documents, Unreal projects. Yeah, I would have never found that. Remember, it's in your project window. So wherever you saved your project, you're responsible for that. Saved, movie renders. There it is. MP4 file. Are you ready? Let's watch it. Wow, look at that. Feeling pretty good. So we animated lights, we animated the character, we animated the cameras, and we rendered all that out. Like I said, there is a lot of noise, especially in the darker areas. Down here on the bottom, there's a lot of noise. It's because it's an MP4. There's chattering in the motion blur and on the character's head up here. Can't really tell from a still, but oh, there's quite a bit of noise right there. Look at as that cube moves away. Look at the ghost trail that's created from that. Kind of makes sense with the vibe here, but in the future, we'll look at how to get rid of those sorts of visual bugs, graphical bugs. Questions about that? We rendered it out. In the future, rendering things out, we'll look at other options for doing that. Rendering out in ProRes, rendering out as image sequences. This isn't really a compositing class, so I don't think we're going to talk about image sequences or EXRs files that much, unless anybody's interested. Like I said, I have another Unreal class that's all filmmaking with compositing Unreal with real world assets. So it's much more important that we render out high resolution renders from Unreal. But this is crucial. These are all the steps for your assignment. So next week, make some sort of avatar. It's probably going to be at Mixamo. But hey, if you want to experiment somewhere else, I will take note of that and add that to bonus points. You get more creative. If you find a custom model somewhere and you auto rig it using Mixamo or something else, or AccuRig like I showed, make a note of that. Hey, this assignment is about getting you comfortable with this pipeline. So it'd be worthwhile for you to try all the different pipelines to see what works best for you. So I want you to find an avatar, rig it in AccuRig or Mixamo, bring that into Unreal, also bring in Mixamo animations or some other sort of animations into Unreal for that character, just like I did with the zombie, and create a little scene around it, fly a little camera around it, create a short little movie, and render that out and post that to your assignment, to the Discord assignment. One other thing that I'd like you to play around with these auto riggers is try to rig something unexpected. Try to rig something that is not 2 arms 2 legs. You know, rig this Gengar lunchbox. What happens when you say that the groin is right here on Gengar and, you know, I'm rigging his wrists? What happens to the rest of the box? How it stretches and deforms when it break dances or does the twerking dance and mix them or whatever. I'd be interested to see that. If anybody has ever used like their phone to photogrammetry 3D scan themselves before, we can bring you into Mixamo really quick now and bring you into Unreal as well. If anybody wants to go down that route, using like Polycam or whatever the flavor of the moment scanner is on phones, that'd be a cool experiment as well. But I'm really just wanting you to show that you can do all these steps. Okay? Questions about the assignment? Not a lot of questions today. Guess I'm really good at explaining. Thank you. Next class, we're going to completely switch gears and we're going to look at the retargeting process in a piece of software known as Motion Builder. A Motion Builder is a PC-only software. It is on all of these computers. The Autodesk software, just like Maya. And we will use this to go through the retargeting process of taking your motion capture data that you've recorded and putting it on whatever avatar that you choose. For instance, I used the zombie today. I could take some of your lovely motion capture data that you recorded a couple weeks ago and put it on that zombie. That's the whole point of the Motion Builder software. Motion Builder's, word of warning, Motion Builder's kind of a crappy, archaic piece of software, but it is the industry standard of motion capture retargeting.
Is it like, you mean archaic like in the UI, or is it just like overall?
It's just dumb stuff about it. Like, I think in the, at least with this 2025 version, they might have gotten this worked out, but I remember coming in here one class and it was like the first year of the post lab. I think this is the third year of the post lab. And we opened up Motion Builder and then I just keep seeing these hands go up from students. And they're like, the screen's wigging out. It's like flickering and stuff. What are you guys talking about? And it was just the Motion Builder didn't support 4K monitors because it wasn't, the UI wasn't designed to work with high resolution displays or whatever. It's like a Windows Motion Builder thing. Like dumb stuff like that. And also, yeah, it looks like it's from 2002. But that's not to say it's not powerful. Well, most of the stuff that we do with Motion Builder, you can do with Maya as well. I'm a Maya person myself. That's how Autodesk is they buy all of these other softwares and then they take their features and they merge them into their suite of other softwares because they got to please the Maya people. So they're going to bring all the Motion Builder features into Maya, even though they're still in Motion Builder because they don't want to forget about the Motion Builder people. It's just a mess. Autodesk is a mess. But it's what we're going to use. And then there's also ways that we can do rigging in Unreal, which I hope to look at as well in the future. All right. That's pretty much all I have, unless there's questions. Let's work on the assignment. Post it up. All right, documentation. Next week, we will be in here as well. And then we'll jump back into the motion capture lab in March a little bit more.